Hey, Senator Mike Gravel, I want to thank you for your contribution to the anti-war movement on behalf of all of the Vietnam veterans, especially those who recognize that that war was wrong, you know, that it was criminal, actually.
Well, let me point out that I appreciate the Vietnam veterans of America for what they've done in trying to straighten out the colloquy that exists between the people and the government. They've made an unusual contribution because they have credentials that the general public does not have.
Yes, I think something like over 5 million soldiers served in Vietnam, and with tremendous suffering, not only to themselves but to the Vietnamese people.
Oh, we lost 58,000 American soldiers, 3 million Southeast Asians, and then of course it continues because many of the soldiers that have come back commit suicide. The reason why they commit suicide because their psyche, their moral psyche has been violated by their personal experiences in war. We see that in Vietnam, we see that in the Korean War, the Second World War, but we see that most now because it's in our face what's happening in Afghanistan and what happened in Iraq. We're losing more soldiers through suicide than we are losing in combat. This is an interesting situation of showing the moral aspect of the wrong we have been doing.
You know, I have to draw a parallel here between what you did and what Bradley Manning has done.
Manning, much more courageous.
But the
perception,
substance.
But the perception.
Right.
Keep in mind, you're talking about a private who was able to discern that his oath of allegiance when he entered the military was not to the White House, not to the generals, it was to the Constitution and the freedoms that that represents. And so he was exercising a judgment of a moral level that's not even comprehended by the leadership of this country. And he's being prosecuted for that. I can't tell you the admiration, and I know Daniel Ellsberg and myself have both talked about this, and we admire him. And also, I really admire the work that Julian Assange has done with WikiLeaks. 90% of what the government holds secret should not be secret. A democracy can only succeed if the people know what their government is doing in their name. We would not have known about rendition prisons and torture if it hadn't been for people in the military and, of course, WikiLeaks revealing a lot more than just the rendition prisons, but various details of policy throughout our leadership role in the world.
I mean, it doesn't come without a price. I mean, taking those risks. I mean, you having read the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record, and of course, Private Bradley Manning having distributed or made it possible for the distribution, the exposure of these documents to the world. What were some of the consequences for you? I mean,
they were substantial, but nothing as bad as Bradley. Although at the time I did not know if I would go to jail or be censured or what have you. And of course, I had a political career, and I was putting that in jeopardy. But I got to tell you, Bradley Manning, to me, exhibited a degree of courage on the battlefield that we hardly see today. You know, I don't think that that he'll, if he's convicted, that he will serve this crazy long term that he's threatened with. Americans will eventually come to their senses because wrongs become known. It may take a few years, but they become known. Whether it's the wrongs of what we did in the Mexican War in 1848, whether it's what we did in the wrongs we did with the Philippines in the Spanish-American War, the wrongs that we did in Cuba. Justice eventually will prevail. Unfortunately, it does not mitigate many times the suffering that those that have the courage to speak out and to act have to suffer as a result of the circumstances. I know categorically that the whistleblowers, and I've met quite a number of them, they're the ones that make the real contribution to American democracy, the whistleblowers. And every time somebody becomes a whistleblower, it changes their lives. It changed my life, changes their lives. But that's that's what life is about. Some people really make a greater contribution than others, and I honor them. I honor them and respect them.
What would be your advice to the anti-war peace movement?
Well, my advice is very straightforward. When you see people protesting over the misuse of power, government power, you have to understand that that is demonstration that representative government is not working very well. Now, we like to think that we have democracies in the world. We don't have democracies. We have representative governments. There's a difference. Regardless if it's Obama or Bush or the Congress, the United States of America is controlled lock, stock, and barrel by the military-industrial complex fused into the Wall Street, which we mean the banking interest, the financial interest of the country. That's where the power lies. And so when we say, we've got to be concerned about global governance, the New World Order, well, we have a New World Order. And that world order is the corporate domination of the global economy. And that corporate domination extends to all the governments of the world. In a place like Iran, which won't knuckle under, that's why they don't want to see Iran succeed. And if they can sabotage it, as they're trying to do, but I don't think it'll work. I'm very impressed with my visit to Iran and the pride and the ability of the people here to sustain themselves economically and grow and prosper. But it's painful because of what the United States is doing without legal foundation and without moral foundation. And where the United States today, and this is what Americans must be disabused of, we think as Americans we're smarter than anybody else in the world. That's a foolhardy view. We're no different than anybody else. We've been blessed. We've been blessed not to have been destroyed with the various wars because we've always fought on other people's land. Well, that was changed with 9/11. And so as a result of that, and unfortunately, we had in office a person who I consider an idiot. When we invaded, as part of our war in Iraq, we created more Al-Qaeda than they ever had. And we do that all the time. Every time, like when we use our power to oppress other people, all we do is create enemies. And that's when people around the world are disenchanted with American policy. George Bush said, well, they don't like our freedom. They love our freedom. Problem is, they don't like our oppressive leadership and arrogance to think that we have the right and to bully European nations to join us. Because you have to understand that NATO is nothing more than the globalization of the military-industrial complex. And we should do away with NATO. There's nobody that's going to attack Europe that I know of, and it's insane. And we should do away with nuclear weapons. Anybody that would dare use a nuclear weapon would be the pariah of the world and would change world history in that regard. So it's a useless weapon. We spend a fortune to acquire it, and it really, morally, has no basis of use.
One last question. I'd like your comments on this law that gives the United States government or some agencies within that government the right to go out and execute American citizens at will.
We are acquiring, as a result of the Patriot Act and the policies of the government, Patriot Act was the Congress and the policies implemented by the federal government, we are becoming very much of a fascist state in that regard. All the people don't appreciate it because not all the people interface with their government in a sort of a violent way. The same thing occurs with our justice system. We've never had justice in this country. You know, if you got money, you got justice. No money, no justice. I don't care who you are, whether you're people of color, whether you're an upright citizen. If you interface with the justice system, if you can't afford it, you don't get justice.
Senator Mike Gravel, thank you very much for your time, and your contribution to peace around the world.
Thank you, and it was a pleasure meeting you today.
Okay, man.